Everyone thinks that the deep ocean today is scary, but it's honestly cute because go back a couple 100 million years and these prehistoric oceans were full of things that would make a great white shark scared. Let's start at the surface with something that proves evolution has always had a dark, sick sense of humor. Meet Xiphactinus. This thing was what happens when you take a regular fish and ask, what if we made this absolutely unhinged? Xiphactinus was about 20 feet long and had the table manners of a toddler at a birthday party. Except instead of cake, it was swallowing other fish whole. And I mean whole. We found fossils of these guys with entire 6-foot fish still stuck in their stomachs. They literally choked to death on their own greed. Now you might think, oh, that's just bad luck. No, this happened multiple times. We have several fossils of Xiphactinus that died this way. Evolution spent a million years crafting this predator, and it kept killing itself because it couldn't figure out portion control. This thing could swim at 37 miles per hour, which means it was faster than most people drive in a school zone. Not me though. It had a face that looked like someone tried to draw a fish from memory after being awake for 3 days straight. Just this long, ugly snout packed with teeth that had one job: grab stuff and don't let go. Scientists call it the terror of the inland sea, which is pretty dramatic for something that regularly killed itself by being too ambitious at dinner. But I guess the fish that really should have chewed its food doesn't sound as scary on museum labels. Here's the thing though, these guys lived in what's now the middle of America. Back then it was all underwater. So if you're driving through Kansas feeling safe, just remember that 100 million years ago, you'd be fish food for something with the self-control of a garbage disposal. But look at it, that thing is terrifying. This is the fearsome Kronosaurus Rex. His name is Flapjack. And if you don't like and subscribe, he literally is going to eat you. Look at his face. This is a fearsome apex predator from the prehistoric period. You don't want to mess with him. But Xiphactinus was just the appetizer in this nightmare menu that was the deep sea ocean. Swimming deeper into the prehistoric abyss, we find Kronosaurus. Right away, you know it's bad because they named it after Kronos, the guy from Greek mythology who ate his own kids. When scientists are referencing child-eating gods when naming their creatures, you know they're messed up. This thing was 33 feet of pure absolutely not. Its head alone was 9 feet long. That's bigger than most people's bedrooms. And that head was basically just a mouth with some brain attached to it as an afterthought. The teeth were a foot long each. Not the whole tooth, but just the part you could see. The roots went even deeper because apparently regular sized death teeth wasn't good enough. Kronosaurus had 4 flippers and used them to rocket up from the deep water when something tasty swam overhead. Picture this, you're a fish having a perfectly normal day, maybe thinking about whatever fish think about, when suddenly the ocean floor explodes and this massive head appears with jaws that could fit around a Honda Civic. Its bite force? We're talking about something that could crush a car, not dent it, not damage it, crush it completely flat. And unlike crocodiles that do the whole death roll dance, Kronosaurus would just chomp down and shake its head around until whatever it caught stopped being one piece and became several smaller, more manageable pieces. Here's what's really messed up though. Fossil evidence shows these things were picky eaters. They'd hunt other massive sea reptiles, crunch through their bones, and then just eat the good parts. We found partial skeletons with perfect Kronosaurus-shaped bite marks taken out of them. Apparently, even 110 million years ago, some apex predators were wasting food. So the ocean had swimming monsters with heads the size of small rooms, treating other enormous predators as happy meals. And then evolution said, hold my beer, and invented Predator X. Predator X is what scientists call Pliosaurus fungi when they want to sleep at night, because calling something Predator X makes it sound made up and goofy. Calling it by its real name makes you realize this thing actually existed and somebody had to dig up its bones without crying. This monster lived in the Arctic Ocean back when the Arctic Ocean was a place you definitely didn't want to vacation. Honestly, I don't know why you would vacation there now. You're probably weird if you do, but whatever. It was 15 meters long, but here's what they usually skip. The bite force was 33,000 pounds per square inch, which is almost 4 times stronger than a T-Rex. And we already thought T-Rex were scary. The skull was 10 feet long by itself, just the head. Scientists found one that was so big they initially thought it belonged to something even worse, which is terrifying because what could be worse than Predator X? Well, we're not very far into this video yet, and trust me, there's a lot worse. But apparently their first guess was bigger Predator X. What makes this extra fun is where they found the fossils. Norway. Cold, dark water Norway. So this thing was cruising around in freezing Arctic seas in the dark with jaws that could bite a pickup truck in half, and it was fast. 5 meters per second fast, which means it could catch up to you even if you had a decent head start and good flippers. The teeth were a foot long and shaped exactly how you designed them if your job was make fish regret being born. Cone shaped, sharp, and built for crushing whatever they grabbed. But at least Predator X had to open its mouth to kill you, so you could theoretically get away. But Dunkleosteus didn't even need teeth. It had something worse: built-in hedge trimmers for a face. This fish decided that regular teeth were for amateurs and evolved razor-sharp bone plates instead. These were two massive blades that worked exactly how a paper cutter works, except the paper was other fish and the cutter was attached to a 20-foot armored nightmare fish. The front half of this thing was covered in bone armor so thick that nothing was gonna bite through it, not even other Dunkleosteus, though they definitely tried. We know this because paleontologists keep finding bite marks on Dunkleosteus armor from other Dunkleosteus. So apparently these things were so aggressive that they tried to eat each other despite knowing it couldn't work. That is commitment to violence. The bite force was 7,000 newtons, which sounds made up, but it isn't. To put that in perspective, that's enough force to snap pretty much anything that wasn't also covered in bone armor. The jaw muscles took up most of the space in its head, which explains why this thing's entire personality was bite first, think never. This thing didn't have a very big brain. I mean, it was a fish. It was a very big, aggressive fish. What's really messed up is how fast those jaws closed though. Scientists calculated that it could snap shut in 20 milliseconds, which is faster than you can blink. So if you saw those jaws opening, you were already done. The math had already happened and you would be bitten in half. These things lived 360 million years ago when the ocean was basically just different ways to get eaten. And even in that environment, everything else was scared of Dunkleosteus. Other predators would see those bone blades coming and just accept their fate. There's no point in running from something that can outswim you and cuts through fish the way scissors cut through paper. The Devonian period ended partly because these things ate everything else and then had nothing left to eat, in fact. But down in the deeper waters lurks something with 10 arms and bad intentions. Tusoteuthis was a giant squid back when giant squids had some real competition for the most likely to ruin your day award. This was 10 meters of pure tentacle, just minding its own business by grabbing whatever moved and stuffing it into a beak that could crack bones. Now you might be thinking, oh great, another big predator. Wrong. This wasn't just big. Tusoteuthis had 10 arms covered in hooks and suckers, and each arm was able to work independently. So while you're dealing with one tentacle wrapping around your leg, 9 others are doing whatever they want. It was basically fighting 10 different enemies at once, except all of them were connected to one very angry squid. The name literally means crushing squid, because being subtle was apparently not a big concern 90 million years ago. Scientists found the internal shells of these things crushed completely flat in the fossil record, not damaged, but flat. Something was grabbing these squids and just squeezing until they popped, which means that there are predators deeper in the ocean that use giant hooked squids as stress balls. What makes Tusoteuthis extra special is that it had the biggest eyes of any animal from its time period. It had these massive eyes for seeing in dark water, which it needed because it lived deep enough that sunlight was basically just a rumor. So picture this, you're swimming in pitch black water and suddenly 2 giant dinner plate sized eyes light up in front of you, followed by 10 arms that are going to eat you. And the really interesting part, these things could probably change colors and glow in the dark, just in case being a giant tentacle monster wasn't terrifying enough. Yeah, evolution really went all out on this one. 10 arms, huge eyes, bone-crushing beak, and a light show. Why not? But if tentacles aren't your thing, this ocean had giant scorpions to offer you instead. Jaekelopterus was what happened when evolution looked at regular scorpions and thought, you know what these need? To be 8 feet long and live underwater. Because apparently regular drowning wasn't scary enough. We needed scorpions the size of canoes lurking in ancient rivers and swamps. This was the biggest bug that ever lived. Those claws were the main event. Huge, spiky grabbers that could snatch fish and just hold them there while they figured out the best ways to make them stop moving. The eyes were huge and could see perfectly in murky water, which is just great because now you know that in addition to being grabbed by giant claws, you were also being watched by giant bug eyes while it happened. Jaekelopterus could see you coming from way further away than you could see it, which seems unfair, but evolution has never been known to be fair. That's just the way life is. What's really wild is that paleontologists aren't even sure if this thing lived in salt water or freshwater, because the fossils show up in both. So whether you went to the beach or decided to take a nice swim in the lake, there was a chance you'd run into a scorpion the length of a small car. the water was not safe in prehistoric times. The good news is that Jaekelopterus went extinct 390 million years ago. The bad news is that it took 130 million years for that to happen, which meant for 130 million years, every body of water on Earth was potentially full of giant underwater scorpions. That is a terrifying thought, just to put it lightly. But diving deeper, we find something that perfected the art of just being annoying. Cookie cutter sharks are proof that you don't need to be big to be absolutely terrible. The prehistoric version of these, called ISISTIUS, were little guys that were only 2 feet long. And they sound harmless until you learn what they did for a living, because they were professional thieves. And what did they steal? Flesh from living things. See, most sharks just bite you and that's that. Cookie cutters had a different business model. They would swim up to something way bigger than them, a whale, a giant fish, a giant reptile, whatever, and just take a perfect round chunk out of it. Not kill it, but just steal a piece and swim away. This method was pure evil genius. They'd lash onto their target with suction cup lips and spin their entire body while their razor teeth carved out a perfect circle of meat. The victim would be left with a wound that looked exactly what you'd expect if someone used an actual cookie cutter on living flesh. Modern cookie cutter sharks still do this, by the way. Whales today are covered in these perfect round scars. It's the ocean's version of getting a really aggressive hickey from someone that you never agreed to date. But here's where it gets weird. These sharks were so small that most of their victims survived getting a chunk taken out of them, knowing that somewhere out there are dozens of tiny sharks swimming around with pieces of you in their stomach. The Miocene versions were doing this 20 million years ago, which means this strategy has been working for a very long time. 20 million years of animals getting free body mods they never asked for. And the sharks just kept doing it because apparently nobody has figured out how to stop them. But further down in the ocean lived something that took the opposite approach to hunting. CAMEROCERAS looked ridiculous and knew it. While every other predator was evolving sleek designs and efficient killing methods, this squid ancestor decided to live inside a traffic cone, a 20-foot long traffic cone with tentacles sticking out of one end. The straight shell was the worst possible design for a swimming predator. Imagine trying to chase down prey while dragging around a giant orange cone behind you, except this cone was made of heavy, rock-hard material, probably created more drag than a parachute. But somehow this worked for 50 million years, which really makes you wonder what the other animals were doing wrong. Those tentacles weren't there just to look scary either. CAMEROCERAS had a beak that could crack through pretty much anything. The tentacles would grab something and drag it back into this crushing machine hidden inside what looked like the world's scariest and longest dunce cap. What's really something is that these things were everywhere. Europe, North America, China. Basically anywhere there was deep water, there were these cone squids just floating around waiting for something edible to swim by. The fossil record shows they were super common, which means the ancient oceans were full of 20-foot traffic cones with attitude problems. Scientists found so many of these that they initially thought the shells and the soft parts were completely different animals. The shell had chambers inside that let it control its depth, so it could sink down or float up depending on where the food was. A depth adjustable cone squid with a bone-crushing beak and tentacles, people. It existed. But just wait, there's something even older and way more confused about what it wanted to be. 500 million years ago, when life was still figuring out basic concepts such as how many eyes is too many eyes, ANOMALOCARIS showed up to the party looking absolutely unhinged. This was way back in the Cambrian period, when everything in the ocean looked like what I dream about at 3 a.m. It looks weird. ANOMALOCARIS had 16,000 lenses in each eye. Yes, 16,000. Which is more than a dragonfly, and dragonflies already have too much. Meanwhile, humans have 2 eyes total, and we think that we're doing great. This thing could probably see you from 3 different time zones. The mouth was also circular with 32 sharp plates that closed inward. Scientists describe it as a cursed pineapple slice, which really makes you wonder what kind of pineapples these researchers are eating. The mouth could grab prey and just crunch it up in every direction at once. There were no escape routes, no safe angles, just 32 different angles to have a bad time. What really messed with paleontologists is that they kept finding pieces of this thing and thinking they were different animals. The mouth? That's obviously a jellyfish. The grabbing arms? Those are shrimp. The body? Well, that's something else entirely. It took decades for them to realize all these random parts belong to one very confusing looking creature. ANOMALOCARIS was 3 feet long in an era where most things were the size of your thumb, so it was absolutely massive for its time. And then there was this alien-looking nightmare with compound eyes and a buzzsaw mouth swimming around grabbing whatever it wanted. It lasted for millions of years, which means this design actually worked. But going into the ocean means we have to meet creatures that learned that patience was a virtue. WEBSTEROPRION was what happened when worms got tired of being stepped on and decided to fight back. This was a 3-foot long bristleworm that lived 400 million years ago and had absolutely no chill when it came to its hunting strategy. Most predators chase their prey around and just make a big show of it. WEBSTEROPRION just dug a hole in the seafloor and waited some more. For hours, days, maybe weeks, just sitting in its burrow with nothing showing except a few sensing tentacles poking out of the mud. It was the ultimate underwater hermit, and it was full of rage. When something swam overhead, WEBSTEROPRION would explode out of the ground and grab it with jaws that were 2 inches long. That may not sound long, but it was 2-inch jaws on a worm. That is bigger than most people's thumbs, and this worm was using them to grab fish that were swimming by having perfectly normally fish thoughts and fish experiences. The jaws were also serrated and worked exactly how you'd expect something called jaws of doom to work. They'd clamp down, drag whatever they caught back into the burrow, and that was pretty much the end of that fish's day. Just, oh hey, there's some mud. Wait, oh god, the mud's grabbing me, oh no! Modern bobbit worms do the same thing today, and they're terrifying enough at 1 foot long. WEBSTEROPRION was 3 times that size and with proportionally bigger jaws and presumably 3 times the amount of rage in its heart. The fossil record shows these worms were successful for millions of years, which means for millions of years, the seafloor was full of hidden trapdoors operated by giant angry worms. Yeah, you want to go swimming yet? Well, if you do, you're not going to for long, because some creatures invested all of their stat points into being absolutely unnerving to look at. DOLLOCARIS had eyes that took up 1/4 of its entire body, not eye area. The actual eyeballs were 25% of this thing's total mass. Imagine if your eyes were the size of basketballs, and you'll start to get the picture of how absolutely wrong this looked. Each eye had 18,000 individual lenses. For context, that is about 9,000 times more than you have. This 5-inch shrimp could see better than a security camera system, which seems like overkill for something that spent its time grabbing other small shrimp on the sea floor. The eyes were so huge they couldn't move them. They were just stuck there, bulging out of its head, giving it 360-degree view of everything happening around it. Nothing could sneak up onto DOLLOCARIS because it could literally see behind itself without turning around. This was the ultimate paranoid roommate of the Jurassic seafloor. When the ocean was already packed with things that had perfected the art of not being seen, this little guy decided the best defense was to see absolutely everything, all the time, in perfect detail. Those giant eyes were so well preserved in the fossils that scientists could actually count the visual lenses. Someone sat in a lab with a microscope counting tiny eye parts on a 160 billion-year-old shrimp fossil. As to how it hunted, DOLLOCARIS would hide in the mud and wait for prey to wander by, which must have been terrifying for anything swimming overhead. Imagine just seeing 2 massive eyes staring up at you from the sea floor, attached to a shrimp with claws and absolutely no sense of personal space. At least that thing only looked at you. Unlike lampreys, which are still alive today, which should bother you more than it probably does. Here's why. They've been swimming around for 360 million years with their signature move of latching onto other fish and slowly draining their blood. They're basically the ocean's vampires, except vampires are fictional and lampreys are very real and have been doing this forever. The mouth is a perfect circle lined with rows of tiny teeth that spiral inward. In the middle is a rough tongue that works exactly how a cheese grater works, except instead of cheese, it's scraping through fish skin and scales. They attach to a host fish with this mouth and just start filing away at it, keeping the wound open so that they can feed. What's really messed up is how patient they are about it. A lamprey will stay attached to the same fish for weeks, just slowly draining it while the fish tries to go about its normal fish life. Imagine trying to get to work with someone hanging off your back, actively draining your blood and making you weaker every single day. What's even worse is that they secrete chemicals that prevent blood from clotting, so the wound stays fresh and keeps bleeding. They've essentially figured out how to turn other fish into a meal that lasts for weeks. It's insane how effective this hunting strategy is. It is so effective that modern lampreys have destroyed entire fish populations when they show up somewhere new. They got into the Great Lakes in the 1950s and just started latching on to everything that moved. I live about an hour away from the Great Lakes. They are scary. I ain't going swimming in that water for other reasons, but that's the biggest one. Within just a few decades, they seriously started wiping out native trout. The fact that this design has worked unchanged for 360 million years means lampreys found their niche early and decided that they were done innovating. It's just like sharks. They've been so effective, why bother changing? But then there are cleanup crew members with serious boundary issues. So if you don't know what a cleanup crew is, basically, if you own a fish tank like I do, you want to have certain members of fish that like to scavenge around on the ocean floor so that they eat up all the leftover food so that the water quality doesn't go bad. Well, the ocean's version of this are hagfish, and they've been around doing exactly what they've done for 300 million years, which is being absolutely disgusting in ways that almost seem intentional. They're blind, boneless, and have made a career out of eating dead things from the inside out. What do I mean? Well, when something dies and sinks to the ocean floor, hagfish show up for the buffet. But instead of nibbling on the outside, they drill right into the carcass and start eating from the inside. Multiple hagfish will burrow into the same dead whale or fish, turning it into an apartment complex of slimy roommates having the worst dinner party you've ever seen. They actually tie themselves in knots to get leverage while tearing meat off bones. Actual knots. They wrap their entire body around itself, brace against whatever they're eating, and then yank off chunks of flesh. That is the most insane thing I've ever heard. But their real party trick is the slime. When something bothers a hagfish, it can turn 20 liters of water into complete goo in about 10 seconds. The slime expands and clogs the gills of anything trying to eat them, so predators just suffocate on hagfish mucus. Modern fishermen have had their entire catch ruined by one hagfish turning all of the water in their net into snot. They don't have jaws, so they use a rough tongue covered in tiny teeth to rasp flesh off bones. So imagine a blind worm with a sandpaper tongue working its way through a rotting carcass while covered in its own slime. Yes, that's been happening in the deep ocean since before dinosaurs existed. But even weirder was something scientists still can't figure out what it actually was. TULLIMONSTRUM is what you get when evolution has a few drinks and starts doodling random animal parts together. Scientists have been studying this thing for 60 years and they're still not entirely sure what they're looking at. Picture this, an eel-shaped body with eyes on stalks sticking out sideways from its head, plus a long skinny trunk coming out the front with a little claw mouth at the end. It looked exactly how a 5-year-old would draw a monster if you told them to make it as weird as possible. For decades, paleontologists kept finding pieces of it and assuming they belonged to different animals. The trunk with the claws, yeah, that's one animal. The eye stalks, those belong to something else. And the body, that must be a third. Nobody thought one creature could be that committed to looking absolutely ridiculous. But they were wrong. The eye stalks were mounted on a rigid bar that stuck out from both sides of its head. So it had panoramic vision, but also looked permanently surprised about everything. The little claw mouth at the end of its trunk had rows of tiny teeth for grabbing small prey. It would probe around in mud and crevices with this thing, basically using its face as a fishing rod. Recent studies suggest it might have actually been related to lampreys, which honestly raises more questions. How do you go from lamprey to whatever TULLIMONSTRUM was supposed to be? What evolutionary pressure makes you develop eye periscopes and a grabbing trunk? The fossils have only been found in one place, and that is in Illinois, and they found thousands of them. So there was an entire ecosystem of these things swimming around millions and millions of years ago, all looking completely insane and apparently doing just fine. In fact, they look so strange that nobody else in the animal kingdom has ever tried this body plan again. But if you enjoyed watching, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Also, YouTube just rolled out a new feature called Hype, where you can give hype to small creators like me, which helps us out in the algorithm. It would be greatly appreciated if you could help me out and give this video some hype points. It's completely free. And if you want to watch another one of my videos, click the video on screen now.